Hey Blockheads, we've got a Patreon now. We would really appreciate your support to help us keep this podcast going. There's a link in the description below, so check it out. Now on to the episode. Whoa! Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, Gene
and V. We interview people in the animation industry about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they want us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
And today with us, we have Pedro Eboli. Hey!
Hey!
Hey, hello! That was a very
Pedro.
fun start for the
Hey!
show.
Off to a great start.
Pedro, so you have recently been on the Rise Up panel with Bobby Pontias, and it was so interesting to listen to your journey and your life, just kind of like the leading up into animation, growing up in Rio, moving to Vancouver, moving to LA. So you have like a very, you have a life full of adventure moving around. Everyone who's listening to the podcast, definitely check out Rise Up Animation. Their mission is to spread information to everyone, like people of color, to just kind of give a better chance to get into the industry and diversify the voices of animation. And I think this is a super amazing mission. And definitely check out their content. It's super great. It's got, they've got not only interviews like the interview of Pedro we're doing today, but also like panels about specific topics like work visas and all that. So definitely go there, check it out, and listen to Pedro's interviews on Rise Up, because it's super informative and got so much information. So that's part of it. And Pedro was part of the first creators to have a show on Netflix, like first animation creators, because I remember going on Netflix looking for animation, and there were not that many shows, like I would say like 5 years ago.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Cupcake and Dino was one of the first shows on Netflix, so that's really cool.
Yeah, I guess we were on one of the first shows that were probably not, didn't come to them through DreamWorks, because I think DreamWorks very early on had like a multi-show deal. They still do with Netflix, and we came in kind of a roundabout way, I guess. And yeah, I think the show premiered around the time that, you know, Netflix was starting to announce all those really amazing creators like 3 years ago, and that now we're seeing their shows come
I know
finally, because we all know that animation takes a long time.
Animation takes forever. That's sure so funny. It's so true. But we're going to kind of still have you tell us your story in a nutshell, and kind of like, how was it for you growing up in Rio, and like kind of like your relationship to art, to cartoons, and kind of like, how did you think, like, did you think you could go into animation? How was that process for you?
Well, I'm 40 now.
Yeah.
So that's a relevant piece of information. And when I graduated high school in Brazil, I went into college in 1999, and back then in Brazil, there wasn't a lot of paths for if you want to work in animation. The animation industry in Brazil was pretty much like a couple of really small studios working on advertising, usually like very 2D traditional, like the kind of animation you see on like a cereal commercial,
right?
And then we had the kind of very niche like festival circuit animators who were interested in doing shorts, and there's like no money, like a really 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 hard life, and I can't even say I was aware of that at the time. So I knew I wanted to do something creative. I love movies, I loved animation, and kind of the path of least resistance for me in Brazil was to go into advertising. So I went to advertising school, worked at an ad agency for 5 years, because I don't know if you know, they have a department called the creative department, which is like, it's what Don Draper does on Mad Men,
right?
He's a copywriter. I was a copywriter too, but significantly less whiskey. and not as good looking as Don Draper, but
That's debatable.
but so I work as a copywriter for 5 years, and I was miserable. It was like you go into the creative department, and ad agencies have a thing where it's like there's a lot of razzle dazzle of like, oh, we have a beer tap in the ad agency, and we got advertising as a whole has like 1 million awards. So everyone who works in advertising has like 5 awards. So it's like, everyone needs to be special and feel special, and like there's a lot of egos, and it's
really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't know that there were a lot. I know that there are some advertising awards, but that's an interesting perspective that it's like overkill.
Oh, it's overkill for sure. Because I think there's a whole, like, they need creative people to work for them. So I think there's a whole environment of like that's designed to keep creative people, in the ad agencies by by paying them well, because in advertising usually pays well in the creative departments, and getting all these awards. So they're constantly trying to massage your egos and stuff. But it's kind of I found it just a very kind of toxic environment where, of course, like animation can be a very toxic environment sometimes. But I think one of the things that makes good animation and makes animation worth working in is because it's a collaborative medium. So everyone in the crew is working towards the same goal. Of course you have cases that in people that kind of break that rule and are assholes and stuff, but
sure.
But if let's say the production is going well, everyone is working towards the same goal, everyone's collaborating, everyone is jamming together and exchanging ideas. And it's a very different environment than an ad agency. And I was kind of like, the creative part of me was not satisfied after 5 years working in advertising.
What was kind of like, if you could kind of summarize it in like maybe a sentence or two, what was the number one thing that was missing for you creatively in like when we were working in advertisement?
It's just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of, let's say. Oh, I stepped on your drawing there. Gino, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't care. It
You
wasn't a good
guys,
drawing.
I looked away for like 5 seconds, and now there's like 1 million amazing drawings.
Well, you're talking.
Yeah.
just like-
Don't worry about that.
But
don't even worry about it.
I think it's kind of like the work at the end of the day is not that creative. It's like
I see.
you are basically, as a copywriter, you're writing puns to sell toothpaste,
Right.
and sometimes you're working for companies that you're like, I kind of don't agree with this company.
Do you feel like even though that was like really like grueling and hard and not like as creative as you wish that it could have been, do you feel like it kind of helped you later on pitching shows? Do you feel like there's like skills that you learn while working in advertising?
Definitely, yes. I'm sounding terribly negative here, but it wasn't a positive experience, like a positive sum for me. But I met nice people who I'm friends with till today, and it does, like, I think it does help with a particular set of skills of like you said, being able to pitch and being in front of a client, and also like a degree of professionalism. I think that like treating that like work, and also not being, I think, insanely attached to your creative work, and kind of finding that balance between like, yes, what I'm doing is creative, what I'm doing like comes from me, and it's there's a big romanticism when you work with art of like, like, this is a piece of me that I'm laying bare on the table, and there's that side too, which I think it's true, but there's also a side of like, this is commerce as well, right? It's like
right.
This animation industry, if you're working for a network or whatnot, or a movie studio, it is this weird intersection between art and commerce, and being able to pitch yourself, and so I think advertising kind of helps with that. Like, definitely the presentation skills was something that you're forced, even from early on in advertising, you're forced to just go in meetings and talk to clients and present your stuff, which I think in animation, like depending on what job you have in industry, you might not have to talk to people for years. So
Probably not, yeah.
Exactly. I think that's something that's really interesting that you bring up, because for me, working in animation in France for 5 years before I moved to the US, like I never pitched a single board. I never had to do that because first of all, there was no time to pitch. So you would just kind of like send it to the showrunner and then they would just kind of like redline it and then you would just finish it. And so there was never that pitch moment. And moving to the US, like having to pitch a board, that was like so scary because I had never done it in my life. So I think it's like really great that you mentioned that like you got used to like pitching, being in front of a room and yeah, having to just like sell like the project and yourself. Because also like were you guys in the advertisement, were you guys like competing with other agencies to get one project picked up?
Yes, we
yeah.
I mean, we had our.
So it's very competitive.
Yes, I mean we had our clients that were the ad agencies, clients that were signed to the agency, but every now and then we would have like we're competing for a new client. Mm-hmm. So for example, at some point we were like there's a beer brand that's looking for a new ad agency, so all these ad agencies in town kind of prepare presentations and kind of compete for the client's money. So there is that too as well.
Just like in Mad Men.
I haven't watched Mad Men yet, so I'm like, for anyone else out there who hasn't watched Mad Men yet, just here's a couple more. But check out Mad Men.
Yeah. Mad Men does like I think does at least a good job representing a little bit of like the toxicity of the industry.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine how awful it can be.
That's how you were like, I am done with this industry. And then how was the process for you kind of like deciding to go into animation? Were you animation like as a career? Like how did you have the idea? How did that get like sparked for you?
I wish I had like a cooler like origin story. Of like like I saw that movie and that it changed my life, but I kind of don't. It was just complete madness of like I'm just fed up and I don't know what to do. And I remember having a conversation with my parents at the time, and I at the time I was doing like a lot of comics and stuff. So I just started looking online, and animation seemed like an interesting career to kind of marry like my love of drawing, because I'm that kid who's like grew up always drawing and always doodling and stuff, but also my love of cinema. And so I just had some money saved up. I signed up for a Vancouver Film School, which is a 1-year program, which was also very important that it wasn't like a 4-year thing, because at that time I had already done 4 years of college. And I was 26, and I was like, at the time, like, I'm so old. I can't spare anything more than a year. So, looking back, it's ludicrous. Like, I wasn't old at all.
But I think it's like a real concern, though. I feel like I get a lot of people reaching out to me, telling me like, oh, I'm already like past like 25 or like in my late 20s. Is it too old to go into animation? Like, can I even just pursue that? So I understand like
it's totally fine.
It's totally fine. And it's good to hear, like, it's good to say that like, no, you can totally do it. It's like 26 is not too old. But but when you're 26, that fear is real.
Yes.
It never goes away fully, I feel. Because, like, I had that same thing. And I think there's a narrative of that for sure. Because people always want to talk about the, like, wunderkinds, that's the ones who you want to applaud. And that's great. That's an accomplishment. But that's not normal. Like, those are weird outliers that manage to get in that young and, get a show before 25 or whatever. Like, that's amazing. But that's really, really, really rare. And I definitely felt that. I didn't get my first animation job until I was 25. And that was like, for me, I had this pressure of like, I need to get a job by 25. And so I like just got in before, before I felt terrible about it. And then my next goal was like, I want to have a show by the time I'm 30, because like you keep seeing these like 30 under 30 lists.
Yeah, for real.
And so you get it in your head. It's like, that's what I got to do. And I was really depressed about it when I was like 29, still trying to get through development. And I was like, man, this sucks. And I felt like such a failure for a while. And then somebody I used to work with said something like, he's like, well, why do you care? Like, why do you care to get a show before 30? So what? So you get a show when you're 32, 33. You still have a show. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I think that applies at any point. It's like even with jobs, it's like, yeah, who cares? Try it. Like, do it, start it. And then when you get the job, you'll have a job in animation. So it doesn't matter how old you are. And the industry definitely doesn't care how old you are.
Yeah. I mean, I think 30 under 30 lists exist because those people are rare.
Yeah. It's an accomplishment.
Yeah. It's like good press, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is gonna get a lot of clicks, or this is gonna sell
It's a good
papers.
headline.
But like, I think it's important to remember, like, yeah, this is to not compare yourself as a person to like geniuses, like literal geniuses who also were in the right place at the right time. And like, it's totally cool, like totally normal to get a late start, and you can bring in more experience of life and different things that you lived through.
Yeah, and I think like if I had gotten a show when I was, like 26, I would have done a bad job at it.
I agree with this so much. This is something that I tell myself all the time. I'm like, holy moly, I am so glad that I haven't had a pitch get like picked up or anything, because I'm like slowly kind of rising through the ranks, and I realize, oh, I need to learn management. I need to learn leadership. Like, those are skills that nobody teaches you, unfortunately. I wish they would, but that you need to be a show creator or showrunner, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a lot of responsibilities that go into having a show and running a show that I'm sure Pedro can talk about, that it's like beyond just having an idea. Like, you're a boss, you're everyone's boss, and that is a lot of pressure.
Going back to Vancouver Film School, what was the curriculum like the broad strokes of the curriculum?
So it's a 1-year program, so it's very condensed, but at the same time it's pretty dense. Like, you get to the first 6 months, you get storyboarding, character design, a bunch of animation classes, life drawing, clean up, because you're working traditionally on paper. You're getting like color theory, and so it's and it's like from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day, and the school's always open 24/7, so you have access to your cool. Desk all the time, and I'm glad that I went in older, because like I said, in advertising, I already had that like work discipline, and I treated that as like this is my work for a year, like, and I cannot waste a second of this, because like I said, back at the time I was feeling old and I didn't have time to waste, so I really try to make it count. So the first 6 months you're learning pretty much the basics, and then the last 6 months you're throwing it into like, you're gonna do a short film, with like with the very very small experience you have. So you're like thrown into the deep end, and you learn a lot by making mistakes, and by like being overly ambitious with your very limited skills, and crashing and burning, and so, but it was really cool. Like, I would go to school every single weekend, because I was an expat in Vancouver, so all my friends were from the school, so we would just hang out at the school every single weekend, drawing and working, and like on the second half of the program working on our short films. But it's very much a mentality of like, you get out as much as you put in. Like, no one's gonna be, people are gonna treat you like adults. They're not gonna be like, oh, you have to do this, please, come on, do your assignment. They're like, no, we don't care. Like, if you're interested, let's go. If you're not interested, whatever, you don't need to show up. Like, there's not a real diploma at the end of this, so whatever. If you just came to like, travel for a year on your dad's money or your mom's money, and just have fun in Vancouver, whatever. So that was an interesting experience. I got to do a short film, which is I think probably like the only short film I've ever done in my life, because after that I'm just like, it's so much work. It's when you're working. So I got to learn a lot. I got to like kind of, even back then, I mean, I've been working in this industry for like 13, 14 years now, but even back then I was already drawn to like, because what happens when you do a short film in 6 months with very limited skills, it's like you either do a 15-30 second film that has beautiful full animation, and it's like, it's going to be the showpiece in your demo, or you can, like I did, kind of embrace limited animation, and because I was more interested in telling a full story than I was in like being a really accomplished animator. So that even back then already like spoke to my areas of interest of like, I try to, I watch a lot of like Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls and those limited Cartoon Network cartoons, so I could like, storyboard it in a way that I could tell a lot of story through not a lot of animation. So I would have scenes where like the character would blink or just move an arm, or it was just a run cycle, and it was kind of a limited run cycle. So I managed to do like a 4-minute film, which was like, I think probably the longest in my class, but and I managed to finish it, but at the same time the animation was very limited, and I had a lot of cheats, and so even back then I was really drawn to the kind of TV animation.
I love that you were talking about like cheats in animation, because I think that's something that's like very, very important when you're making a show on a budget.
Absolutely.
And that's gonna speak a lot to like what you're gonna do next, like what you were about to do next when moving back to Brazil.
Yeah, and so when I moved back to Brazil, I was pretty lucky that I knew nothing about the Brazilian industry. I tried to get a job in Vancouver. I kind of interviewed for a couple of jobs. One of them was like a Peanuts show that Studio B at the time was going to do. And I think Studio B turned into DHX, and now it's called Wild Brain. So it was way back when. And I got a couple of job offers, but I needed like a 2-year offer in order to get a visa back then.
Oh, really? Like you needed a full 2-year?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And those job offers, of course, they were like for 6 months. Like it's you work on that project and then you're out. They wouldn't guarantee you any more than that. So I went back to Brazil, and I was like kind of bummed out. Like, oh man, what am I gonna do? I know nothing about the Brazilian animation industry, and I was really lucky that in 2 weeks back in Brazil, I got a job at a really small studio at the time called Birdo, which at the time were like 5 people, and I worked at Birdo for 10 years. They ended up being the co-producers of Cupcake and Dino. But back in 2008 when I joined the studio, it was mostly working on very, very short segments. So like, a commercial, like a music video, or someone's short or something like that, or sometimes video game like vignettes and stuff. So it was a great continuation of school for me, because I worked not only with really talented Brazilian artists, but also because of the nature of the projects were very short. So 1 month I would be doing character design, the next month I would be boarding, the next month I would be animating, the next month I would just be in betweening for a month. So you got to do a little bit of everything, and I think that was pretty essential for me when eventually I got to direct my own things, because I think like a director is kind of like, a jack of all trades, a master of none. Yeah. So I was never like, I was never the best board artist. I was never the best animator. I'm too impatient to be a good animator.
It's
I relate to that so much. Animation takes too long.
I used to have the patience. I think it was like a fun thing to do when I was younger, and then It's like thinking of how many drawings I have to do to get 1 second of animation out. It's like, fuck that. I can't.
It's so funny. So you were doing all these like different, you were doing pretty much every single part of like every single job in the pipeline.
Yeah, and in very small chunks, so I could really try it out. And every project we got was in a different style. So, one month I would be doing something that was really cartoony and like squash and stretchy. The next month we'd be doing rotoscoping, which fucking sucks. I hate rotoscoping.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's
soulless.
It's the most. I mean, I dig the results, but just like actually drawing the rotoscoping, it is. I wanted to die. Yeah. It's so boring. Because I especially because you're usually drawing on top of humans and stuff, and it's so you're trying to keep the characters very like proportionate and all that. And I kind of I'm really drawn to cartoony stuff. Anatomy is not one of my strong suits.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of found. I found my groove. I found the things that I was drawn to as a director. I think, the one thing I really like and I still like to do on every production I'm part of is character design. That's the one thing I'm like, I think I'm pretty good at, which I'm not at storyboarding and animating.
And that's really cool to hear, by the way, because a lot of people think that you have to be a storyboard artist in order to like eventually get a show. But like, it's really cool to hear. But you do have experience in storyboard, so you've been a little bit like also a storyboard artist. But if you kind of present yourself as a designer and you still manage to like get so far 3 shows, even more, right? Because you did you're gonna get to that next, right? But you did like a couple other shows that are not listed on IMDb.
The one that's not listed is a preschool show that's currently in production in Brazil, called Bada Bean, that I co-created. But that was one where like I was on my way to Vancouver to direct Cupcake and Dino by the time we sold that show to Discovery Network. So I ended up not participating on any of it, but I did create the show. So, but yeah, I mean, the storyboard artist thing, I think it's great because, I think a storyboard artist is, an accomplished storyboard artist is such a complete artist. Like you have to understand directing and shot composition, you have to understand animation, and character design. Like it is a really, really hard position to work in. But the whole thing about like you need to be a story artist to be a show creator, that's a very LA thing.
Yeah.
It really is, and it's really frustrating because it like boxes people in, and I feel like it just, I don't know. It like I've had run-ins with that where I would try to pitch and not get like turned away, but definitely felt like I wasn't being taken seriously for not being a board artist, and when I was not a board artist. And it just sucks because there's so much more to even just show running than doing boards. Like you're really not boarding at all when you're a showrunner. You're juggling a lot of things.
Oh, you're not boarding at all. I mean,
you shouldn't be.
Like if you board like the pilot.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's it. Yeah, and then like it's about directing and I mean. Usually just an EP. Like in my case of Cupcake and Dino, I was the EP and showrunner, but I also directed all 52 episodes.
Oh wow!
Which was too much work.
Is this something that you ended up doing because there just wasn't like it was it a budget thing, or was it something that because it was kind of like a project that was maybe like close to your heart, you wanted to be more involved with it? Kind of what was the reasoning behind you having to do so much?
I think it was part budget, but also when I was given, because I think that's how the Canadian system works a lot of times. Like there's one director to direct, a full season or a full 2 seasons. But when I was given the option of like, do you want to direct as well? I was like, yes, I do. Because, the show was really near and dear to my heart. And I wanted to, I don't know. I think I'm maybe a little bit of control freak sometimes, but
that's your baby.
But and for me, it also came with like
right.
I want to have that experience. I want to, be able to learn from the process, which I did learn a lot because Cupcake and Dino was the first show that I did that was of that size and scope, and involved like dozens of animators and board artists, and it has a much bigger budget. Because the first show that I created is a show called Osvaldo on Cartoon Network Brazil. That was a very, very low budget show, and it ended up doing really well because at first was supposed to be just for Cartoon Network Brazil, but it ended up playing across all Latin America and in some Asian countries and African countries and European countries. So it ended up going around, but it was like held together with spit and duct tape. Like it was.
Yeah. But that's like, I feel like that's so telling of what it's like to work in animation, like not in America, because like working in France, oh my gosh. Like I remember in the Rise Up podcast, you say like an episode for working on Osvaldo was like the budget was less than a minute of animation in like an American show. And it's like, that is so true. Like I worked on a show, the very first show I worked on in France, we literally had a crew that was such a skeleton crew that they only had the board artists. We had no directors. Like there wasn't even really a showrunner. It was just like the producer was kind of like approving the episodes. And all of it was done in China. And it's like, yeah, we just had like maybe like one or two supervisors. And it's like, yeah, like we like the budget for the whole like 50, no wait, it was 104 episodes of 7 minutes, and we had less money than to make, I think, an episode of American animation. So I was like, yeah, I hear that. It's like, yeah, it's a lot less money.
But then those French shows, of course, I'm generalizing a little bit, but there's a lot of French shows I really like that, like, they overcome that stuff by having, like, beautiful character design, and, like, the boards are really smart.
I think that's the thing is that, like, yeah, definitely in France, because I think maybe like the industry is I think the industry started in France really fast. Sorry, I'm going into this segue. We'll get back to your story ASAP. But like it started because Disney had a studio in Paris for a little bit. They made Emperor's New Groove in the Paris studio, and that kind of like I think that's kind of what started the animation industry in France, and then we were able to like kind of have the knowledge that was kind of brought to the country thanks to like the Disney. And then but then we wanted to keep making animation, but we still had no money. But yeah, I feel like so we had to like learn to do like very smart boards, kind of like what you were talking about, Pedro, like looking at all the like smart, very limited animation TV like Dexter's Lab or anime. That's why also there's like we reference a lot of anime because it's very economical in terms of animation, like except the big budget episodes where there's like the big fights, but like a lot of episodes are very like just like the you don't go outside of the information you need. That's really cool. That's really interesting to hear. And that's like the same kind of like network also. Like French shows don't usually go into American TV. It usually kind of stays in Asia, South America, Europe, Africa. It doesn't really make it into North America.
Yeah. And when we were doing Osvaldo, like this, even the whole studio, Birdo, which at the time, like, went from 5 people to maybe 10 people, we had never done a show before. So I like to say that Osvaldo was done without adult supervision because it was so cheap that like Cartoon Network bought it and they're like, yeah, we'll put it on. We trust you guys and stuff, and no one was supervising us. Like we got a government grant to make it, and so we just kind of like try to figure out how to make a show. So we did so many things in such a roundabout way that was like so much harder to do than if we had planned it a certain way. But also we got some interesting results. Like, and we got, especially in the first 13 episodes, we got an amazing animation crew, which were the people at the studio that were nice. Used to working in like high-end advertising, and we're trying to figure out how to do like limited animation and crank out more seconds per week, but there are still some really incredible scenes in there that I look at it and be like, wow, we we spent way more time and money than we should on this shot, but you know, we didn't know what we were doing, so we just did it anyways. So it ended up like it took us like 2 years to do like 13 episodes.
But that's fast, I think. Like it's a pretty fast turnaround, because you said like 2 years from like inception to like finished, right?
No, 2 years from like executing.
Okay. Yeah. That's also
Because
cool to hear that you guys had the talent already. It's just like the pipelines were not set up specifically for TV animation, but the talent was there thanks to like advertising.
Yeah, definitely we had the talent, and you know, like when we went from that to Cupcake and Dino, then we kind of, you know, bumped a little bit into a wall of like, because now we're dealing with a Canadian co-production, and which Cupcake and Dino was mainly produced by E1, who are the owners of Peppa Pig, and they were doing it for Netflix, and we had another studio come in and do service work for us, which was Atomic, but all the pre-production was being done in Brazil. So then we kind of hit a wall of like, we got to figure out how they do it, and we have to deliver in the time that they expect us to deliver in.
When you say like you have to figure out how they do it, you mean in terms of like you felt like there was a pressure to deliver quality that was higher than Oswaldo?
It wasn't quality, it was more like the processes, you know, like making sure that everything is delivered within the format and within the expected timelines and all this stuff. So now we're having to like really, you know, train people to in kind of a more traditional pipeline.
I see.
So we had to put together like a character design team, and we sent out tests and stuff, and we were very lucky to find people who were incredibly talented that kind of just pick it up so fast. But the studio was starting to grow, and we were doing, you know, more than one show at a time, and there were like a couple of other studios in Brazil who were also starting to grow and doing a couple of shows as well. So it was kind of like being part of the growing pains of the industry of like, we cannot train people fast enough for the demand. And also there are no like really good schools that you can pluck people from that are like, oh yeah, you know, like whoever went to this school in Brazil, we can just pick them up and they'll be ready to go in a day.
Yeah.
Like there was no such thing. So one of the big studios in Rio is the studio named Copa, who they are like these incredible people, really hardworking. They started their own school, so they had this. They made a deal with the mayor of like the mayor's office in Rio, and they offered free animation classes for public school students. So every year they have like, you know, they pick like 20 people to be part of those classes, and a lot of those people end up, you know, working at the studio.
That's great.
So they kind of had to create their own solution to that problem.
I was gonna ask you, since you said there wasn't like a lot of like animation, like TV animation in Brazil was basically pretty much non-existent at the time. How was it for you about like finding writers? And also I wanted to ask you about how you learned about writing. Because writing is such an important part of like running a show and making decisions, and you have like a very complete like artistic career, and I kind of want to like pick your brains on that, and like kind of like, are there like writing schools in Rio? Kind of how was that journey like for you, and what is the landscape like?
Well, I never went to writing school. Like I said, when I was working at an ad agency, I was a copywriter, so I did the writing on the ads, because the way that creative departments are organized in ad agencies is you have a duo. They're like duos of teams of two. So one is the writing person, the other one is the art director person. So I wasn't even an art director, because when I graduated college, I didn't feel confident enough in my artistic skills to be an art director. So I'm like, I'm gonna do the writing part. So I did get some writing experience there. Of course, it's a very different thing, but, you know, just mostly writing puns and stuff. But
That's useful though. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah,
think
for
it's part
animation
of.
especially.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's like you have to show that you're witty and that like your show is going to be witty. So, I mean, yeah, I know why you laughed, but also like, but it was still like important, I think.
But so I but you know it was always something I was interested in, and that's something I always say when I talk about pitching,
Mm-hmm.
and because especially in animation when I'm talking about pitching to a crowd, because I've done a few talks and stuff, and it's usually a crowd of artists, right, a crowd of
Yes.
visual
Yes.
people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I tell them is like, if you read a couple of books about writing and about screenplays and storytelling, you are so far ahead of everyone else, because it's I think a part of the job that people don't pay much attention to when you're someone who's very visual.
I think it's like I really agree with that, and at the same time, because I was kind of doing that on the side. I was like, well, that Pixar story list of books, there's like a bunch of like story books, so it's like reading story by Mackie and like the Truby and like, all these, but they're so kind of like I feel like when you start with I don't know, for me when I just it was just so hard to understand story and writing. No matter how many books I read, I felt like it just didn't click until very late. So I don't know. Maybe you were just like, did you watch like a lot of TV? Did you just like watch a lot of stories, and were you just kind of like intuitively just kind of like had the knack for kind of like story structure and character motivation and all that?
Well, I'm a huge film buff, so I've, I always watch a ton of stuff and consume stuff like voraciously, uh but also I think it helped that I started my career working in that 11-minute format, because it's such a good way to learn, because it's such a pure distillation of like a story formula, of like a story circle. There, because you don't have any time to waste, right? So you're not thinking of usually not thinking of a B story, much less a C story. So you focus on your A story. You have to introduce what that story is about in like in the first 2 pages. You have to introduce what the conflict is pretty soon. You have to escalate it. You have to solve it, and you have to put a ribbon on it, and all that in like 11 minutes in 14, 15 pages of a script. So I kind of learned, like, my first writing experience was writing some episodes for Oswaldo. Like, I wrote one that never happened for the original pitch, and then I wrote what eventually became the pilot, and I don't know, I just kind of brute forced it. I just kept writing it until I was happy with it, until it like resembled a story.
Right.
And at the time I was reading a lot of books about I think a common mistake is start by reading Story by Robert McKee.
Yeah.
I think I made a comparison. I think when me and Gene talked, reading Story by Robert McKee is like when you want to learn to animate for the first time in your life, and you pick up the Animator Survival Kit.
Yeah, the Richard Williams book. Yeah.
And at the same time, though, that's the book that everybody tells animators to read. So it's kind of like this, like a crazy like cycle, right? It's like, oh well, do you want to get good at it?
It's a good resource.
Like
yeah, they are good resources, but I think they're both books that overcomplicate things that aren't that complicated.
Yeah.
I think they try to categorize it and like put too many rules into some things that are like, like just go for it and figure it out. Like that's kind of a rough structure, roughly how you should do it. But I think they're very, like it's very like grumpy old guy books about like, this is how you do this, and this is the only way, and I'm gonna break this down for the next 20 pages on how you do this one thing. And it's overwhelming, I think, if you're starting. I think after you've gained some experience and after you've done it for a while, I think going back to those books and like being able to filter what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
There's helpful information in those books. But I think like for animation, like just pick up that very simple Preston Blair book, or the Eric Goldberg book, and just have fun. Just go try to draw a run cycle and see what happens. Like, I think learn by doing it.
the fun is the important part, because if you're coming at it so clinically right off the bat, it's gonna do more damage. I think it's like you're never gonna enjoy it because you're gonna be worried about the restraints so much. And like I just started animating when I was young, and because I just wanted to make things move. You know, I just thought it'd be cool to make things move. And it wasn't until way later that I felt like there were gaps in my knowledge, and that's when I turned to books. But like, I always feel like people online will ask those kinds of things. It's like, everyone wants honestly, they want the shortcuts. Like they want to know what's the easiest way to like learn a thing, and they'll ask for books or like what software are you using or whatever. But it's like, I think it's the same thing with writing as it is with animation. It's like everyone has a different style. Everyone has a different way of thinking and approaching just learning in general. So it's like,
I think it's just so hard to get people to read what you write. You know what I'm saying? Like people to look at your art, it's kind of easier to find a community and for people to be like, you could fix this, or you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But when you're a writer, you know, like people don't want to read.
No, people don't want to read.
So that's kind of where I'm kind of like, do you feel like you read a lot of scripts like Pedro, or do you feel like it's just mostly watching movies that you were like kind of getting a lot of the...
I for the past 5-6 years, I was very lucky to be working alongside a writer named Mark Satterthwaite. He developed Cupcake and Dino with me. So the story was like, I created the show back in São Paulo when I was living in Brazil. Pitched it to this Canadian company, and then Mark, who's a writer and Canadian, he was working on another one of their shows, and he saw the pitch for Cupcake and Dino, and he was like, I want to work on this. And they're like, well, you're already working on something else. And he's like, well, I want to work on both. You guys are gonna put me on this,
great,
please.
Yeah.
So because he loved the drawings, he loved the world, and we, so I interviewed a bunch of writers for that position of like story editor for the show, and me and Mark like hit it off right away, and we've had a work marriage for the last 6 years. It's exactly like being a couple, where we'll celebrate together, we'll fight, we'll make up and be like, I'm sorry, man, I love you so much, I'm sorry I said that, I'm sorry, but we've been working together, and since I moved to LA, we've been kind of operating as like we've been selling ourselves as a creative team.
That's great, yeah.
So it's been great, and it was a huge jump in my career, because I think for me it really helps. Like you said, it's hard to get someone to read your writing, but it's also like it's so easy if you have someone else to bounce ideas off of. Yeah. Because you get instant feedback. Like you don't need to wait. So what we've done for the past 6 years is, we have like a million shared Google Docs, and whenever we have an idea, we'll put it there and be like, is this anything? And if the other one says like, nah, that's nothing, then we move on. If the other one's like, oh, that's pretty cool, what if we did this and then added this thing, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So I think ideas kind of evolve very organically for us, because we already have a really good rapport, and we already have and I think we have very complementary skills. Like I am more drawn towards like kind of goofy, cute, and sometimes a little more like backstory heavy stuff, and like world building a little bit, and he's very much like he's a character guy through and through. He loves character. He loves like more sitcom-y stuff, and we both love heart, and we both love stories about empathy and stuff. So it's a good combo. And so all that to say that in the past 6 years, like the way we've divided the work between the two of us is we'll sit down, we'll talk together, and we'll write a lot together. But we usually, when we're writing together, we're writing like bullet form. So we'll have this big map of what we want to do, and then he'll go off and he'll write the script, and I'll do the character designs, and I'll draw, and like help come up with the visuals, and then we'll just share stuff with each other. So he'll send me the script, and I'll do my pass, and I'll send it back to him, and he'll do his pass. And same thing with the designs. Like he doesn't draw; he's purely a writer, but he's a really visual guy, and he has a really good eye for like, that helps. Like, oh, this character is better than this character because of this, and this and that. So that's how we got our job at Disney TVA. We worked there together as a team for a year and a half, and that's the reason why I moved to LA.
That's awesome.
Was to work at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, nice. Do you feel like would you have wanted to move to LA if it wasn't for that Disney? Like, if you didn't have like the Disney opportunity, would you have tried to move to LA, or would you have like tried to stick to
I would have. I mean, I think I would have tried to move to LA. That's kind of the dream for everyone who works in animation, that's right? True. And it's a weird, like, it's a conflicting feeling for me, because at the same time I had, like, my school was in Brazil. My maturing as an artist and as a professional was in Brazil, and I love the Brazilian artists I've worked with. They're really good friends of mine, and I just learned so much, and I had so much fun doing it. And I think I want the Brazilian industry to keep on thriving and to keep on growing and to keep showing the world that what we can do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you get an opportunity like this, when it's hard to pass, right? And so I think, unfortunately, like, we do work in Brazil, but we're always like keeping an eye out on like the industry here and being like, oh man, like the budgets are so big.
I know.
And you get to do so much cool stuff, and like all the networks are here. But thankfully, like, places like Netflix seem to be very aware of Brazil as an industry. And there's lots of Brazilian productions being made. Like, I know like 2-3 Brazilian people who are currently working on their own shows for Netflix, animated or live action.
Oh, that is so cool.
And Brazil is like the third biggest Netflix market in the world. Amazing. So they are really, really, really investing in the country, which is awesome. And I hope HBO Max does the same, and Disney and all those guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, right? It makes sense. Yeah.
But I did a talk for Pixelato, the festival in Mexico, the other day, and it was all these amazing Latino and Latina artists who had their show ideas, and they were doing this workshop, and one of the people in the workshop, like, it was an artist that I really admired from Latin America, and I was surprised to see her there. It's like, wow, what are you doing here in this workshop for, because most people there were like beginners and stuff.
Sure.
And she said something that made me really sad. It's like, yeah, all the work I've done in my country doesn't matter.
Oh, for that's.
I know. Yeah, I know exactly how that feels, because it's like, that's also the reason why I asked you this, is that, like, even in France, even though people say like, yeah, French animation, blah blah blah, the thing is that, like, nobody watches French animation. Like, yeah, maybe they'll watch just like one show. Like, everybody's gonna be like, oh yeah, Wakfu, and it's like, Wakfu is just like one show in a million other shows. None of the shows that I worked on, and even like when I go back to France and talk to my family, the one show that everybody can be like, oh, I've seen that show, is The Loud House, which is an American show. So it's kind of like, oh, well, it's both great that like they've seen my work on TV, but also it's like I had to move to LA and work on an American show for my French family to be aware of my work on TV, because they haven't seen any of the French shows that I worked on. So I totally relate to that feeling. And I relate to that feeling of like sadness that you felt. It's like, oh wow, you do have to move to another continent.
Yeah. And it's a really sad, it's just sad, like, that the industry here is so navel gazy. But there's so much stuff being made here that you can't fault them for being navel gazy, because they're making 100 shows
I know.
a year.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
But you know, like I wish it mattered more. I think I wish the international market mattered more. And I think it's starting to change a little bit. I think I think for Netflix, for example, like a show being successful only in the US doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I think a show needs to be successful outside of the US for Netflix to consider it a successful show.
Yeah, because it's like they had a presentations like telling us that now there's more subscribers that are international than US, which is kind of funny because international is very diverse, but you know, at least it pushes.
They kind of lump it all together.
Yeah, it pushes the like agenda in a like in a little bit of a different direction than it used to be in. So that's like really good.
But yeah, and I think that's a good thing because it kind of also like forces places like Netflix and then kind of the other networks end up following, which is like forces them to have a wider POV of the world, like realizing that, you know, that kind of Spielbergian American suburb, it's not the most relative thing in the world. Like not everyone relates to that. Not everyone relates to having a big front yard and, you know, having
even in America that's not relatable anymore. It's like that's so like detached.
Yeah, it's relatable. That's the word.
Yeah.
I just kind of brain farted really hard.
That's okay.
So I think that's great. Like I read a script the other day that I can't talk about what it is or anything, but I had a big problem with the script because it was a very traditional kind of Western, like you know, American / European story, and it was about the small town that people had to save the small town, but the script never gave you a good reason for why the small town had to be saved other than it is a small town. So, you know, it's it's inherently good because and that's a very like white American European,
that's really interesting
conceit. And my note to them was like, you got to give them a reason why this small town is so important, because just being like a suburban little town, I don't think it cuts it anymore. Like, because I can't relate to it.
Yeah.
I think it's like, it's probably like the way that I kind of like think about it is like this kind of like nationalistic type of story. Like, but it's true that you need more because it's like small, I don't know. It's kind of that's funny. That's interesting that you bring that up as a theme and that even is a theme. I feel it's like, oh, globalization is bad. Almost like the subtext of it, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
that's such a strange, it's definitely there's some xenophobia at the heart of it, I think, because it's like there's so much exchange of ideas, so much more exchanging of ideas, there we go, when you're bringing in other cultures and other countries and stuff. And the whole small town thing, I think, is still very deeply rooted in like 1950s 1960s Americana, where like everyone, you know, had their nuclear families, and it's just not life anymore. It's just like those towns are not doing well, and there's a reason why. And it's strange that everyone's clinging to that, because I don't know,
I just think there was for the longest time it was kind of almost like a mindless thing where like the default setting, if you want the most neutral setting as possible, it is an American suburb. And it's like, that's not really neutral for most of the planet. That's not the most relatable thing in the world for most of the planet. I grew up in a huge bustling 10 million people metropolis by the beach. That is all buildings. There are no houses anywhere.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because I remember when I first moved to the US, I was like really young. I was around like 12. It was because of my dad's job, and I actually grew up watching almost no American content for some reason. And when I would tell my friends like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like probably move to like LA, it's in California, and they're like, duh, I know where LA is. And I was just like, I don't know. I didn't know. It's like everybody sees that content. I mean, I don't know, like where I grew up, it was like everybody saw that content and everybody knew the American mythology. I felt like I was so much behind for not knowing about American culture as a French kid, because everybody else knew, and I was like, I don't know. So yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Is like, yeah, because my day-to-day life did not look anything like American sitcoms. School didn't look like American sitcoms. Like, you know, the landscape of it also.
And I think that's, you know, it's been such a one-way street for so long that, you know, like I grew up on a steady diet of American culture. Like, you know, I grew up watching all the sitcoms and all the cartoons and all the movies, and they're great. There's amazing stuff in there. It's impressive. It's great art. But, you know, I think it's time to like evaluate that one-way street in which like I know who Hulk Hogan is. You know, like I grew up in Brazil, and I know who Carrot Top is. I'm sorry. It's yeah, I know but it's absurd that I know these things, and at the same time, like people don't even know what the capital of my country is. You know, like
I know, yeah. That's something that's like really. That's something that it's hard to not be bitter about. Honestly, sometimes it's because, you know, it's like, I'm supposed to know what Chuck E. Cheese is, you know, and it's like, why does it even matter that you know? But it's like, well, if you don't know what
it shouldn't,
you know, like, what if I don't know what this is, then I don't get the joke. And there's like a lot of like, you know, I don't know. It's sometimes it's like
That was something actually was I forgot what I was watching, but yeah, my girlfriend mentioned like we were watching something and it had a parody of Chuck E. Cheese. And she mentioned that she's like, do international markets even know what this is? Because it's like, and I was like, I don't think they do. Like, I think that kind of like Chuck E. Cheese, you know, kids playground kind of like pizza thing, it's like very American and very suburban American too. And I had never thought about that. And so this is an interesting conversation to have, because it's like, there's probably a lot of stuff like that.
Even just prom.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Prom is like, I mean, I understand conceptually what prom is. I've just never gone to prom or never been to one, and it's like a concept that does not exist in France. Like when I actually came back to France, like a couple of my friends were like, do they really have cheerleaders in the US? I'm like, yeah. And they were like, no. And then I was like, do they really have like quarterbacks and like the football team and the football events? And like, yeah, they do. And they're like, no way. And then they're like, do they have prom? No. I was like, yeah. I was like, no, they don't have prom. It was just like, you know, it was just like, yeah.
I
it's
love
like
this visual.
It's like a mythology. It's really a mythology. It is a mythology. It's not like
it's the Americana.
And I think the like this the solution to this is not, you know, it's not like let's keep making Chuck E. Cheese references. I think that's fine, because, you know, like it is a reference in America. But also, I think the solution is not shying away from other stuff that seem foreign. You know, like when you try to put a reference to something that's not American, and an executive or someone will say like, "Oh, we can't put that because it's not relatable, or it's not, you know, people won't understand it." I think we should be allowed to then make references to things that are outside the culture now. And normalize them and treat them as normal. And if you don't get it and you're curious, you might want to look it up and you know, learn something new. Yeah. And don't stop the Chuck E. Cheese references, even though like I think every show has done the Chuck E. Cheese episode at this point. Definitely. But you know, like let's just broaden.
I think it's like
the references.
What I think is kind of interesting is that, like, I think you can still make the spirit of a Chuck E. Like, since we're talking about Chuck E. Cheese, like you can make the spirit of a Chuck E. Cheese like reference work without making it so obviously a reference to Chuck E. Cheese. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I think it would be more interesting if it was like more character driven and more detail driven. Kind of like, it's funny, for example, I don't know, to see that like a restaurant that like a lot of characters enjoy is really gross, and it doesn't have to do anything with any like big brand thing, you know, like you can just show that it's gross with like actual details in the cartoon. I don't know. I think that's funnier and relatable to everyone, because I'm sure everyone has seen like at least one restaurant that's kind of that has that spirit.
That's like the animatronics are what people always come back to. You know, that's like the big thing. Yeah.
But also, you know, like I think the Chuck E. Cheese thing has been so prevalent in all animated shows, and I guess this is the welcome to Chuck E. Cheese bash.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because it's a natural thing that, you know, all the creators, all the showrunners, you know, were like white Americans. So that it's natural that a reference like Chuck E. Cheese becomes, you know, prevalent because it's funny and it's part of their lexicon. So I'm not faulting the, you know, white American creators putting Chuck E. Cheese in their shows. It is part of their experience. It is part of their culture. But I think now that we're seeing a more diverse group of creators and showrunners, I think the process is going to be natural to include different references and different points of view into the shows, and hopefully we'll have less of the Chuck E. Cheese episode. You know, like I'm happy that now we live in a time that, you know, like it would be unacceptable now to have, you know, like a white Anglo-Saxon voice actor do the voice of a Latinx character, for example. You know, so
there's changes.
So that's good.
Something I was thinking of is like how when anime first came over to the States and like they were trying so hard to Americanize everything. It's like the reverse of that almost, where they wanted to just shove it into the American culture. You know, where like onigiri was donuts for some fucking reason, and it's like that's gotten way better, and it's gotten, you know, it took a little while, but now it's like they'll straight up have like Japanese concepts in anime now, and they won't even bother explaining them. It's just like, you have Google, I don't know, like, and so there's that, I think, is the most like notable one, because anime is such a huge industry, and just because it like kept making money, they couldn't keep up, and people just kind of got educated in the culture, and now everyone knows a lot more about Japan and about all these other things. It'd be really cool to see that kind of happen with other countries, I think. Just the sort of bringing stuff in and not feeling the need to over-explain or whatever, you know.
Yeah. And anime was lucky that, you know, like it came from the audience. I think like now, if the audience hears a bad, like, Americanized dub, they will complain about it. So
I also think like like some cultures are like kind of also, I mean, I say that sometimes because I think about like French culture, and there's like a TV, like an animated TV show that I think is like hilarious, but I'm like, this would, like, people, like, this is referencing French culture too much to a point that it's like, I don't think it would be funny to anybody else outside of it, you know.
There's stuff like that. I mean, even in anime, you know, there is anime that usually gag-based stuff where it's like so deeply ingrained in culture that it like doesn't translate, and that's fine too. Yeah, like this is a tangent. It'll be quick, but you know, it's like Shin-chan. It is actually very Japanese in its original material, and when they tried to translate it, they made it very like South Parky. Like they tried to like make it offensive and American, and it like, it's fine, but it's weird. It changes the tone, and it isn't quite what the show, I think the original show, had intended. And I've watched it in Japanese, and it's different. Like it has a different, even if I don't get every reference, I still enjoy it because I'm like, oh, this is like genuine. It feels a little more genuine. It's not like poop.
But I think if the content is good, a lot of people are willing to put in the work.
I think so.
You know, to get it. Like speaking of French culture and comics and stuff, like Asterix is super. It was huge in Brazil when I was growing up, and it's very European. There's lots of references to like European history, very like minute stuff. But you know, I had friends who were absolutely hooked on it, and that's like how they learned a lot of their like European history.
That's so funny.
Reading Asterix comics. You know, it's so.
That's funny because Asterix is like the epitome of like, we have to protect the small village.
Yeah.
That's typically.
It's different.
That's so funny. No, it's exactly what it is. It's exactly like, oh, these like guys are trying to invade us, and we're gonna like keep them at bay.
I'm not saying the politics of Asterix are, worth defending, but it is a window into a different culture that many people around the world are willing to put in the work to understand.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How do you? We love to ask this question. How do you deal with creative block when it hits you?
Oh, that's the name of the show.
Yeah.
That's the name of the show.
Woo! Oh, now I got it. I don't know. I'm very like I think I mentioned before. Like I'm very not romantic about my animation career. So I think I'm kind of a practical person, or I want to be a lot of the times. So I think like creative block can be overcome by just sitting down and thinking about it and trying different things and not being I think not being afraid of being wrong or being bad. I believe in like just kind of for drawing or writing, for anything like that. I believe in what Judd Apatow calls the vomit pass, which is like you sit down and you just write. It doesn't matter if it's the worst thing you've ever written. And same as drawing, like with character designs, which is something I love to do. I just kind of sit down and draw, and not being scared of just being the worst, because it's probably not going to be great, because it's just like, it's a vomit pass. You're just putting it on the page. But I always find it easier to rework something that's concrete, that exists, rather than coming up with something out of thin air. So for me, the vomit pass, both for writing or for drawing, it works for me as like, okay, now I have something on the page that exists, and now I can work on it, and I can rework it, and I can refine it. So it doesn't matter if it's terrible. It kind of helps you get through that first stage of like, the blank page syndrome or whatever. So, so my solution is very practical. It's like, force yourself to put something on the page, anything. No one has to read it. No one has to look at it. It can be a complete piece of shit. But now you can mold that shit into something that it's not shit. So I think that's my. I mean, I'm not someone who like, believe in those like origin stories of like, oh, I was sleeping one day and I had a dream and the muse hit me.
No,
and, the inspiration came and I was one with my art and it came into fruition like the Virgin Mary giving birth to baby Jesus. And I just don't believe in that stuff. I think it's a lot of it is like artist talk, or like artists trying to feel like artists or like these special beings that hover a few feet above the ground. And I think at the end of the day, especially if you're working on the industry, on TV shows or movies, it is a craft. It is about like practicing and getting better little by little. There's no like there's no magic brush or nothing like that. So
most things start bad. Like I think most art or whatever starts bad, and you just I always see it as like a marble statue that you're just chipping away at, and you're like, I know I see the statue in here, but this looks like shit right now. And so you're just like trying to figure out what the actual shape of it is.
And I think the vomit pass is like it's putting the piece of marble in front of you that looks like nothing, but now you have something.
You make the first chisel or whatever. That's cool. We had a question from I think it's with Dalek. Which 3 characters do you enjoy drawing the most?
Yeah, you had one question. Out of like any characters in existence, of the characters on the shows I've worked on.
Let's answer both. Like, let's do like your character.
Yeah, why not both?
Yeah.
On the shows I worked on, I think it's definitely like Cupcake, Dino, and Hugo and Cupcake and Dino, because I think those characters were created in a time when I was like doing a lot of little animations. So the first time I drew Cupcake and Dino, it was just like I was just goofing off at home, and I was like animating these characters doing like a little dance. So so they're very simple, and they're very simple on purpose because, you know, I'm a lazy animator, and I wanted these characters to be extremely simple so I didn't have to draw a lot in order to make them dance. So I love the simplicity, and they're just so easy to draw that I can, like, you know, whip them out in like a few seconds and do some fun poses and really focus on the stuff that I like to do, which is like the expressions and the poses and stuff. Whereas I feel like the characters from Ollie's pack and the characters from Osvaldo are a little more involved. They have a little more line work. So I find them less fun to draw when I'm doodling. And I think it's been like a recent thing that I'm trying to get back into after we left our Disney overall, and we've been pitching around town. Is like we were pitching a show to one of the networks, and I put in a lot of work to try to come up with stuff that was like very simple and appealing, which for me is a challenge. But then when I find something that I really like, it's just really fun to draw it. And as for like characters, any character in the world, I think I draw a lot of Marios.
Yeah, it has a Mario right here. It's very good.
Yeah, and for some weird reason, I draw a lot of Batman. I'm not even like a big Batman guy, but when I'm doing most of the stuff I post on Instagram, for example, it's just like, you know, like I open Procreate and I'm watching TV and I'm just like, you know, just doodling whatever, doesn't really matter. But a lot of little Batmans come out for some reason. I think that they're just fun to draw. Because it always starts with the little ears, and then I'll do like a, you know, little beady. I usually draw my Batman.
Yeah.
It's like almost Batman.
Yeah.
Oh, I love those shows. So, oh my gosh, that was one of the best animation I've seen in, I don't know. It's just so fun and goofy. I wish there were a little bit more fun and goofy shows. A lot of the animation is a little serious nowadays.
Yeah.
But, you know, it comes in waves.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to hear you guys' interview with Greenlit, because I think it was so refreshing to see Jellystone as just like this uncompromisingly goofy show.
Carl keeps the goofy alive.
That was all about the comedy, you know, like Gumball is one of my favorite shows, and also goes back to that, you know, what I was talking about, TV animation. Like I'm someone who, I find the animation on Gumball way more charming and interesting to look at than the animation on like The Little Mermaid. And I know, you know, that's probably gonna have some angry DMs my way for saying that.
You think so?
I just find it more fun. Yeah, because I just like really snappy, like comedic animation with like really interesting inflexible expressions. And I'm you know, and I recognize how technically skilled something like, you know, The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, sure.
Let's pick Little Mermaid. But I recognize how technically difficult it is and how much of a craftsman you have to be. But I just find it less compelling to watch. I think it's just not very fun in terms of like expressions and pushing that comedy, and it's almost like a lot of the really traditional like 2D Disney movies. I feel like, you know, that Disney's like this stock company that has the same actors playing different movies. A lot of the same faces. So and it's not even the design sometimes it's just the acting. Like, you know, everyone does the big, you know, the big anticipation before, you know, doing the movement and a big overshoot and overlapping action and all this stuff, and it all kind of moves very similarly.
I agree with you.
And it's all by ones, and I think it's so refreshing to see. Like, I love animation by 2s and 3s, and, you know, like it's rare to see something by 2s and 3s that hits like the big time. So that's why it was so refreshing to see, like, you know, Spider-Verse and Mitchell's versus the Machine taking advantage of that stuff. And I hope it happens more often. Because, you know, like, animation is a medium that you can do anything.
Absolutely.
And I think for 40 years, a lot of like the big animated studios kind of been doing one thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to see weird, wacky stuff, you know, like just
Yeah.
it's yeah.
I think a lot of what I see, because I hear what you say so much, because I like cartoony animation. That's what I like to do during my day job, and I've been in a couple situations where I've been told like, oh, this is too cartoony. Like you got to make it more real. You got to make it more real. And I was like, well, why is this, like, you know, like to myself, why is this a trend? Why are people looking for something more and more realistic, more and more like toned down? And then I'm starting to realize like, oh, it's because I think a lot of animators are like kind of tired of being treated like kids that we're not making live action. Like I think I see that a lot. It's like, no, we're just as good as live action.
Yeah.
Look at how realistic we can get. And it's like, to me, it's kind of like too bad, because it's like, well, that's why we're animating.
Yeah.
That's why we're not doing live action.
There should be a difference.
You know, yeah. But you know, to each their own.
There's a lot of writers, I think, who are, you know, like people who are purely writers who, you know, see animation as like a lesser a lesser thing, and they're like, yeah, I'll work on this animated show because it's easy, but I really rather be working on, you know, Boardwalk Empire or whatever. And that's why I was really lucky to have Mark as a partner, because Mark loves animation and he loves writing for animation. He's not someone who sees animation as like a stepping stone or like an easier path, because it's not easier. It's super hard, and it has so many challenges. And
I love Tuca and Birdie for that reason, because it's an adult show that is so wild with its animation.
Yeah.
Like they just don't hold back. And it's really hard to see an adult animation specifically. Everything might as well be a sitcom. A lot of stuff might as well be a sitcom.
Yeah.
I mean, Adult Swim actually, I think, is probably the network that has like the craziest animation.
Always.
Like Super Jail is like really cartoony.
No, they've always been great. They have a good mission statement. It's like experimental.
Right. It's like very indie experimental. Yeah.
Well, I think there's always a push for it, because I think, you know, it's like there's always going to be that push and pull of artists wanting to do weird shit, and sometimes occasionally a network concedes and is like, all right, fine, you can do your weird little loopy loops and stuff. I've really come to appreciate animation on threes. Like you mentioned, animating on 2s and 3s, and man, like I think it's more impressive for me at this point to see people do really cool expressive stuff on 3s. 3s, for people who don't know, I guess I should explain, is like, you know, there's 24 frames in a second usually, and Disney stuff, it's very smooth because they're animating every single frame as a new drawing, which, yes, it's smooth, but it has this weird glidey feel to it, and I don't know if it always looks that good to me. But 2s is a lot of American animation, and it's 12 drawings per second. And 3s is a lot of anime is on 3s, and it's a new drawing every 3 frames.
Yeah, so that's like 24 divided by 3. That's like
whatever
that's
that
like
is.
8.
Don't ask me.
I think. Yeah. Right? No, it's not good.
It's
math.
cheaper. Yeah. It's cheaper. It's 8.
It's 8.
Yeah, it's 8. It's easier to do. It's cheaper. And that's also why anime gets away with having more detailed drawings. Because it's less. But like, you know, stuff like Studio Trigger, when it's good, is like, it's so snappy because it's usually on 3s, if not like 4s and 5s, I think. And
Oh, anime really pushes it.
Like when you get it down to like, I've been experimenting with that in my own stuff, like that I'm working on right now, and it's like, it's actually really kind of liberating to be like, oh, I can just have 3 drawings here instead of like 12, and you get the same effect, especially for comedy. It's like sometimes all you need is 2 drawings and it lands.
I think sometimes comedy works even better with less frames, only because a lot of like comedy comes from surprise, and you get a better element of surprise if you just have a frame that pops. There's like,
oh, it's funny.
Yeah, there's that scene in my short where Zeus just like drops from the sky, and it's like a single frame. And I was like so careful to make sure that the animators didn't over animate that, because I was like, this will not be funny. And it was totally like a Family Guy moment, but I love how they would do that when something would happen and like within like a frame, and it's like, wow, shit, okay, that's so much funnier than if it was over animated.
This is something that you do have to write in your board sometimes. Like I've had to write that in my board sometimes. I'm like, oh, don't animate. This is supposed to pop from this frame to this frame.
Yeah, got to be snappy.
That's funny.
Pedro, what kind of goals do you have for your future, for your career, for whatever?
Right now is getting something
Yeah.
greenlit. But yeah, because I finished Cup and Dino. I was so I did that in Canada. I was back in Rio, and I was working remotely on Ollie's pack as an EP, which was basically meant like I was giving notes, and like sending out like drawings and stuff to the crew in Canada. And while I was in Rio, that's when me and Mark, I flew to LA for like a week, and we pitched Disney 5 ideas, and to our surprise, they ended up buying all 5 and putting us on an overall deal. So I was there for the last year and a half in the development department, and we were developing our ideas. And then since May, our contract ended. We're still developing a few projects with Disney, more in like they call it a step deal, but it's like more like a freelance capacity, because when you're an overall Disney, you're exclusive to them. You can't pitch anywhere else. And then since May, me and Mark have been pitching other places, and we sold a kids show to a different place, and we sold an adult show with some other creators at a different place. So we have these things in the fire right now, but it's all development, right? So, and development can take another year and a half. Sometimes it can take 2 years. It just moves really slowly. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And so right. I'm kind of like right now, I'm like, I just want to start production on a thing, like it doesn't even need to be my thing at this point. Like I want to go back to, like looking at boards and working with other artists and being in a studio and seeing stuff animated and signing off on stuff. It's just been a while now. Like I've been in this world of development for like almost 2 years now at this point. So it's it will be nice to like get going on something totally. And actually make something that's gonna be seen by people, like I don't need to be, at this point I don't even need to be the creator. Like I'd be happy to like direct some stuff or but yeah, I'm in this world of development for a little while now, and the amount of stuff that we have in development, I think gives us a really good shot that's one of these things is going to eventually get made. So maybe in a couple of years I'll be able to announce some concrete projects, which I'm very excited about all of them. I think they're all great, and I'm happy to develop them, and I'm developing them with some places that I like are like my dream places to work in, and with really cool executives. But yeah, I just want to. Yeah. I just want to execute it.
That makes sense. That totally makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially after so long. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm kind of impatient and fidgety a little bit, and that's why we ended up having 4 projects set up in different places, because Mark is also kind of impatient, so we were like, this is not going. Let's I don't know, make another one. And so we started just making all these pitches, but so like. Development is really not for the faint of heart, or for the people who are too impatient, because it just takes a long time. So it kind of gets to me after a while. Yeah. So I like production. Like on Cupcake and Dino was great. Like I worked myself to death, but it was just so fun waking up every day and like seeing like 10 different episodes, each one in a different stage of production. So approving a script in the morning, but then like looking at dailies for a different episode, and doing sound design notes for a 3rd episode, and being in the editing bay for an animatic on the 4th episode. I really thrive in that environment. I just really like doing multiple things and keeping myself busy, to the point that like I was waiting for all these contracts to be signed, because contracts also take a while to sign if you're setting up a new project. And also waiting for my visa, and all this waiting kind of led me to like a period of like, it's like I I felt really depleted from doing all those pitches in the last few months. So I kind of didn't want to create anything new. But at the same time, I wasn't working on anything that was currently happening because I was just waiting for contracts. So I got in a kind of a big funk of I just have nothing to do. I wake up in the morning and I go play video games and stuff, and it sounds great, but I was just like, I was just kind of sad, and it led me to like a real moment of do I get all my self-worth from work? And if I'm not working, I feel like I'm not worth anything. So it led to some good positive soul searching of like I shouldn't get all my worth from my work. I should also, focus on other things. I have an amazing fiance who's like amazing, who's great, and she has 2 kids who are now my stepkids, who are also the greatest little guys in the world. So I'm trying to keep a more healthy balance of all those things.
I think a lot of people have been going through it. I definitely did, and it's like, it's just good. I think that's the positive outcome of the pandemic, is that everyone has had to reshift their priorities and rethink things, and like it's nice, because I think we all got really, really caught on that work aspect of life and forgot about the life, especially as creatives, because we're powered by experiences, and it's good to recharge.
It's also it's hard to get out of that mindset, because it's like such a competitive industry. You do have to work really hard on it. It's kind of hard to just kind of reel it back, because when you've been doing something for so long,
and when you have nothing coming out and nothing to show, like Twitter it's
poison. Yes.
Because people are doing cool stuff, and that's awesome, and I'm excited to see all the stuff everyone's doing. But then you get that feeling of like on Instagram, it just feels like everyone's on vacation but you.
Yep.
On Twitter, it just feels like everyone has a project coming out but you, and you're like, oh my god, I'm just gonna fall behind. It's been a year.
It's really toxic. So, it really makes us think that we need to constantly be putting work out, and like something that it's been kind of comforting for me, because I have the same problem, but it's something that's been comforting for me is like realizing that nobody's actually paying attention to me as much as I think they are. It's like there's so much shit out there that like if I just drop anything at any time, if people like me, they're like, cool, nice, new thing, and then they move on, and that's actually kind of comforting, because it's like, oh, I don't need that.
I mean, during the height of the pandemic, when I was still at Disney, I was like, I had to like leave Twitter for a little bit, just for like mental health purposes, and because the pandemic also kind of blurred the lines between your personal life and your work life, because you wake up and you're at work, and you have nothing else to do because you can't leave the house either. So it was and I was doing all this cool stuff at Disney that I was like really proud of, and me and Mark were happy with our work, but also like it's like you feel like you have nothing to show, and you're just like spinning this wheel like a little hamster. and so it was good to leave Twitter for a little bit and kind of put things in perspective, and realize that I feel very lucky, and I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I am. I know that being on an overall Disney in development is like something that a lot of creators are out there would be glad to have, and I was when they told me that it was going to happen, I couldn't believe it. I was back in Rio, and I was like, oh my god, like I was back in Rio. Cupcake and Dino had not been renewed, which was like my plan on Cupcake and Dino was like, if we got a 3rd season, I was going to work directly in Toronto with E1. That's what I was pushing for, but then at the same time, Cupcake and Dino didn't get renewed, so I didn't know where I was going next. Ollie's pack was like, oh, you can work remotely, so you can work from anywhere. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to Brazil, and at the same time, my dad passed away, and I was just like, oh, the feeling I had was like, oh, I took 4 steps towards my goal, my career, and then I just took 4 steps back again. Like I'm back where I was before Cupcake and Dino. So so it just felt like really, really depressing. And then but
Mm-hmm.
the truth, the reality is that it wasn't. Like Cupcake and Dino was a big part of why me and Mark got the job at Disney, because the executive, the story was that Mark went there for a general, and people who don't know, like a general meeting is just a meeting that you go to, like, you know, meet the people in the studio and see like, oh, this is my work. If you guys have any work, you know, I'm available and stuff. So Mark went there on a Monday to talk to one of the executives at Disney, and her daughter had just binge watched Cupcake and Dino the weekend before, because her friends in school were all watching Cupcake and Dino, and she wanted to watch it. So she watched all the episodes, and then the executive, you know, ended up watching a few episodes alongside the daughter. And when Mark came in the morning on the Monday, she looked at Mark's resume and she was like, "Oh, you developed Cupcake and Dino, and you're the story editor. I just watched the show and I loved it. We need more comedies. We need more, you know, like shows that are fun and have a big heart." And Mark called me from the parking lot, and he was like, "All right, we got to pitch Disney. Buy a ticket to LA, and we're gonna bring some projects for them." And that's how we ended up pitching Disney. So you know, it wasn't a step back at all. It's just like, you know, life doesn't always work the way you want it to work, and you gotta adapt.
Life is definitely not linear. Sometimes you do a thing and you're like, nobody saw it, and it's like, it was a waste of my time, and why did I do this? And then like, for some reason 10 years later it pays off, and it's like, holy moly. You're just always planting seeds and you don't know which one's gonna sprout.
I've come to think of it like that too.
And back to that, you know, that thing I mentioned earlier, that the Pixelato festival, where, you know, this creator was like, but I feel like what I do doesn't count in America. And you know, that kind of stuck with me, and I kept thinking like, no, it counts, because it counts for you. It counts for you know, your experience. It counts for your professional growth. And, you know, like, if you ever land something else, you can prove that you have the experience, you've done it before, you have the talent, and you executed it. It doesn't matter if it didn't play, you know, on TV in the US. Like, you got better, and you got, you know, you're walking your path, and you shouldn't judge it by how many people in LA of all cities have seen your thing, you know. So it counts. It doesn't matter what you do in your country, what you do in your, you know, local networks and stuff. It totally counts. Like I love working on Osvaldo, and even though no one here knows what it is, like, I bring with me what I learned from that experience, and I use it in my work all the time. Yeah. So,
is there anything you want to plug while you're on the show?
No, I don't have anything to show. Watch Cupcake and Dino on Netflix. It's gonna be there forever. Hopefully. I think. I don't think we're ever getting a third season, but maybe watch it so much that they regret that they didn't give us the third season or something. I don't know.
Well,
and by they I mean the algorithm.
The algorithm. We pray to the algorithm.
Yeah, and check out Pedro's interview on Rise Up Animation. It's on YouTube. It's called Rise Up, and there's even more insider information about Pedro's life.
Yeah. And I like to say, there was a time when I used to post a drawing a day on Instagram, and that time is gone. But I'm still there. I still post stuff every now and then. I'm on Twitter. And, hopefully making a show that more people will see than my previous shows.
You're doing more dad things now. That's good too. You just had like a regatta. What was that? You were like put together like a boat?
Oh, it was a cardboard regatta. It's something that Anna did like in a couple of years ago, and of course they didn't have it last year because of the pandemic, but this year they decided to have like a version of it, and she talked me into participating, and it was really fun. We spent like a week building a cardboard boat, and then we took the boat to this place like in Santa Monica that has like a pool, a big swimming pool. I forgot the name of the place. I think it's called Marion Davis Guest House or something like that. But it's a swimming pool that's by the beach, and they So you sign up your boat and you race other cardboard boats, and the fun is just kind of, seeing your boat fall apart and sink.
Yeah, I was gonna say it probably just melts, right? It's like cardboard.
Well, our boat we did
Wow.
the first race was with the two boys, and in the first race they won their race and the boat held together, but then we used the same boat for the adult race with me and Anna on it, and because of the first race the boat was kind of already kind of soaked in the bottom. So the second race was a total disaster. Like as soon as we jumped in the boat started to sink, and we just like doggy paddled the boat all the way to the end of the pool.
So
we got we got dead last, but it was
That's like a really that right there is already like a funny episode idea for something. Like that's great. A cardboard boat.
Do the cardboard regatta episode, guys. There you go.
Putting it in my book of notes.
It's a very American thing, but
but it doesn't have to be. It could be anyone. That's the end of this creative block. Thanks to Pedro for being our guest and sharing his story.
Thank you guys so much.
And thanks to your listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Creative Block, creative without the vowels, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks to my sister Clements for editing the podcast.
If you love our show, then support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews as well as bonus episodes. Click the link in the description of this episode to check it out. I've been your host, Gene.
And I was V. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.